am standing on federal property. This is the post office in downtown San Jose, right across from St. James Park and down the block from the courthouse. And I'm standing here because I'm allowed to record here on federal property, but at that courthouse, if I record any attorneys or anybody, they are going to try to arrest me. So I wanted to come on and just talk about what's happened in the trial. I'm going to get more of an update later, but we had some people inside watching the trial. And this is one of the first known trials of a divorce attorney who is being sued for both malpractice and fraud. And he's being sued by a former client who is 81 years old. And there are several issues. There are the issue that he just simply didn't give him a defense. And you hire an attorney to protect you. And when this elderly man went to Mark Erickson, he asked Mark Erickson to protect his separate property from this wife that he thought was engaged in some gold digging type behavior. And the way that that looked was she was doing things like putting their money into a trust with only her name. She was taking cash and gold coins from the safe of a rich uncle from her first husband. And what Mark Erickson did was refer his client to criminal defense attorney. Ka-ching, that's more money. When his client was trying to get along with his wife and really just wanted a post-nup, she did an unlawful detainer on her and got him kicked out of the house. Mark Erickson referred her to Travis Whitfield. And so this case and all the bad things that a divorce attorney can do to you is the first time that we know of a jury hearing what's going on in our modern courts. And it is about, in large part, private judging. But the problem is that the judge in this case, Judge Sabin, has said that nobody can bring up the issue, good, bad, or the ugly, of Mark Erickson putting his client into private judging where the worst harm happened. So I thought it was interesting. Some court watchers noticed today that one of the allegations in the underlying malpractice lawsuit is that Mark Erickson worked more to help his client's ex-wife, throwing the client under the bus, and the ex-wife's attorney, who was David Patent. And evidence of that is the fact that Mark Erickson was going to call the ex-wife as his defense in this lawsuit. So I want you to think about how ridiculous that is. Hire a divorce attorney to protect you from a gold-digging ex-spouse, and that divorce attorney starts working for the benefit of other lawyers in the area to convert your assets and your separate property to their pocket. So we know that Mark Erickson generated business for Michael Smith, who was the private judge. He generated almost $500,000 in claims for his client's ex-wife's attorney, David Patent, and he generated money in expert witnesses, forensic people, and all these real estate appraisers, because it was always about getting this property. And so this case should remind everybody that once you go to a divorce attorney, you are surrendering your assets, because the divorce attorneys are not going to represent you like you see on television or in the movies. They're literally going to work to get the available community or separate property they can get. And they're going to do it not just for themselves, but for their buddies. And that's one of the problems with this private judging. So I've been coming out at the courthouse, talking to people who are observing the case, and today one of the court watchers noticed that David Patent, the wife's attorney, came into the courtroom and was doing wink, wink, nod, nods and little cueing to Mark Erickson's defense attorney, who is Bruce McLeod. And the other defense attorney is Brad Benning, and we were earlier today, I did a little live stream this afternoon, just right down the block, about 2 blocks away, at the ADR Services private business. So we also talked about how private judges are using these reunification camps, reunification therapists, minors counsel, and it's all connected. But when you come into the court because of a divorce or a custody case, You don't see all of this. These are words that the lawyers make up and titles they give themselves, and it's all about following the money. So we're going to take this one case because it does not involve children, and we're going to take it and we're going to follow the money and show you what one bad divorce attorney hire can cost you. We're going to show how gold diggers in Silicon Valley end up winning and getting the protection of the lawyers and judges. And then we're going to talk about the insidious part of private judging and what's going on with these reunification therapists, reunification camps, minors counsel, because when they don't have real estate to go after, these divorce attorneys go. These divorce attorneys are going after children. And so they're weaponizing the children. They're putting you on one parent on supervised visits. They're keeping the children from one parent, knowing that parent. If you had somebody steal your children, kidnap your children, you would give everything you have. Well, most parents would give everything you have, your money, your time. You would go to everybody you could think of. You would go to reporters, you would go to any news outlet, you would go to the FBI, the police, and these people are doing that over and over again. We're waiting for the train. That's VTA. We'll talk about VTA too later on. So the reason I am so dogged on this hearing and following it so closely is we have never seen a divorce attorney related to private judging being sued and a jury hearing what that divorce attorney did. So today, the plaintiff, the former client of Mr. Erickson, testified in the morning, getting some more exhibits in, and then an expert came in to tell the jury what Mark Erickson had done that was essentially malpractice and leads to the fraud claim. So I'm going to post jury instructions. I'm going to show you how all of this is done. But I do want to talk about the part that the courts are doing in this. The courts, and I'm going to post divorce attorney Travis Whitfield's divorce case because that was in front of a private judge as well. And we're finding that too often attorneys are using private judging for their own divorce cases, meaning they're even using private judging to game their own former spouses. And so I'm doing this as much to educate the public, but to people who are married to divorce attorneys, you better know what's coming at you. And Travis Whitfield, who Mark Erickson referred, did, during all of this going on, did have a private judge in his own divorce case. So again, private judging doesn't have to be an attorney, but there are these big businesses, JAMS, ADR services, signature resolutions, that have made this a business of moving the high asset and middle class divorce cases out of the courthouse and into private judging. And they can do that. That's a legal scheme that is allowed. But the courthouse is not tracking those documents, meaning they're not requiring the private judges to post the cases. They're not requiring the private judges to make the disclosures. Your attorney sits there and tells you this guy is going to be great. And what Mark Erickson told his client about his private judge was he was a good guy and he knew him from playing baseball with him. And so that kind of connects to the other baseball case because a former Major League Baseball player, David Segui, just filed with his son a racketeering case. And he has an attorney out of Arizona. And they are claiming that what these attorneys are doing related to reunification camps and reunification therapy in family court is essentially racketeering. And everybody always says, oh, file a RICO, do this and do that. Well, they're very expensive to file. You need an attorney, otherwise you haven't got a prayer of winning. There's rules of evidence and experts that need to be hired, depositions that need to be taken. And just in covering this one malpractice case, I can see how costly that is, and I'm going to share with you all of that. Because in family court, there is no jury. There are only judges who are very cozy with the attorneys, and so we're going to start to talk about these relationships and conflicts of interest and when it gets in the way of fair administration of justice. And part of that fair administration of justice is that we all have access. Just like public records, we have the right to access public proceedings that are before a private judge. They're called open proceedings, and we have the very same rights that we do as walking into a public courthouse to watch these proceedings. But these attorneys have all developed this little scam of not telling their clients you don't need to use an attorney at $600 an hour, and they never disclose their real conflicts of interest, meaning how much business they're getting from one attorney in the case. And we are going to break this down because it is now costing taxpayers. It's costing taxpayers to have this hearing, that a jury has to sit through this, and the judge has broken up the trial into separate weeks, and we're going to keep covering it. But today's development was that David Patent, the attorney for Mark Erickson's former client's wife, who is charged with colluding with Mark Erickson, came into the courtroom to give a little attaboy good college try for defending the case and ripping down this 81-year-old client. And Mark Erickson has noticed the ex-wife as a witness. So any divorce attorney that throws you under the bus, gets sued for malpractice, and then notices your ex as a witness in their favor has pretty much let everybody know that he threw you under the bus. So now we're going to wait and see what a jury says, because the expert witnesses are testifying, the plaintiff and the defense are testifying. The defense has worked overtime to keep us from talking about private judging in that courtroom, so we're going to talk about it out here and everything that's wrong with it. And if I run into where it works and where it was good and someone tells me private judging was great for both of us, I'm going to let you know that too. And tonight I'm going to go back and I have Gavin Newsom's private judging files. He used a private judge. I have Travis Whitfield's. I have the files from the Hayward case and the Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt case, which were also private judging cases that bubbled up in the courts of appeal. But this is the first time that a jury, everyday people that are working in Silicon Valley, is hearing what divorce attorneys are doing to their clients in the name of a divorce. So 9 years into this divorce, and Mark Erickson is facing a jury to answer for why he has done what he has. And David Patent seems to be very interested in that. So for those of you who have any of these attorneys, Mark Erickson, David Patent, we're going to show you these individual attorneys. But if you use your imagination, you can see them in all the attorneys in any community. And this is what we're going to keep talking about, and we're going to keep reporting on what the jury is hearing and what the jury is not. So if anybody has a question, I'm going to head out and I'm going to go hear from the court watchers who sat in that hearing all day. But I did think the development of David Patent coming into the hearing and Mark Erickson initially noticing the ex-wife as his witness was newsworthy that we needed to talk about today. Okay, so anybody have any more questions? Oh, and I am going to say it one more time because I don't know if I've said it enough. Arbitration. That's when you can go before an arbitrator at any of these big businesses, JAMS, ADR, and you arbitrate an agreement. And attorneys often put arbitration in their fee agreements, so if you dispute that, we'll wait for this to go by. This is VTA again, and it is commute time. So when arbitration goes into, you see it in employment contracts, real estate contracts, attorney fee agreements. If you see a mandatory arbitration clause, you should run. And you should think very hard about signing that agreement, because that agreement takes away your right to go to court. Mediation. Mediation is my favorite for anybody getting a divorce. You get married without attorneys, you should get divorced without them. And a mediator doesn't need to be an attorney. And a mediator gets you to agree on everything you need to in your divorce without ever going to court. And then when you agree, you file the final settlement and you're done. There are really good independent mediators. You could go to the big businesses for mediation too. And the last one is private judging. And private judging's evil step twin is referees. And I'm going to tell you the difference. A private judge doesn't need to be an attorney. And you can see this in custody cases where they try to get a parenting coordinator appointed, and it could be a therapist or one of these reunification camp operators, they can be a parenting coordinator. And you're going to pay them $600 an hour, and they're going to be the private judge over everything related to your children. They're going to decide where your children can live, how much support you're each going to pay, if they're going to go to therapy, if they're going to go to those camps. And that is essentially a parenting coordinator, which is also a private judge. A private judge need not be an attorney, so you could get your friend Bob to be your private judge and settle up your divorce, take it to an attorney to file it in court, and it can be over, and it can be over as quickly as you want it. And then the last thing is the half step up from private judging, and that is a discovery referee. They tell you it's a discovery referee, but what that is a court-appointed attorney, and it has to be an attorney. It's under CCP 639, and that person is supposed to take all the discovery and do all the work out of court so you don't tie up public business. But if a judge appoints them, they have immunity. All of these people have immunity. You appoint a private judge, you appoint a mediator, you get a referee assigned and appointed to your case, they all have immunity. They don't have to do their job, they don't have to be fair, they don't have to do anything, and you can't sue them because they have absolute immunity, not quasi-immunity, just like police officers have. So we have given immunity to attorneys, to be judges, to be paid to be judges, and that's why I'm covering this case, because the judges who are trying out and want to be private judges someday don't want us talking about private judging, so we're going to keep doing it. So somebody said from private phone, can you talk about jurisdiction? So jurisdiction in the legal sense refers to, you'll hear a lot of times where a court will say, I don't have jurisdiction over this. Every court case is defined, whether it's a federal lawsuit, whether it's a state lawsuit, or whether it is just a custody case in family court, the jurisdiction is determined by certain things. So one of the things I learned about jurisdiction is we have a lot of people with international family members, and they've lived abroad and they come here, they immigrate here to work in Silicon Valley. So that's a big deal. It's called the Hague Convention. And the Hague is international law about how we deal with this. And the Hague Convention says that jurisdiction in family court is determined based on where the parties live for the last 6 months before the case is filed. So I know this from my own sister who was married to somebody who lived in Europe, and when they filed for divorce, she had come back to California and she was allowed to file her divorce here, and the court here had jurisdiction because she had been living here for 6 months. But if she had waited only 5 months to file that and had only been back for 5 months, they would have told her that jurisdiction would be in Europe and she would have to deal with her divorce in Europe. So I hope that answers your question a little bit on jurisdiction. And if you think a judge not having jurisdiction is going to stop them from ruling in a case, I'll show you 100 cases where it doesn't. So you guys don't pay attention to, they're lying in court. We know they're lying in court. Everybody's lying in court. They almost have made it acceptable. So the only people not lying in court are usually the ones that are outraged that everybody's lying in court. And so you guys got to get past that. They're not following the law. I could sit in that courtroom all day long and tell you about 100 things for each judge that they're not following the law on. So when a jury is watching, the judge is a little bit more careful, which is why we're watching this. And we're also watching what the judge wants talked about out of the presence of the jury. So I hope that answers your question. Whoever said, do I do court watching? That's the job of a journalist, to do court watching. I am going to be posting some videos that catch up with some of my other videos. And one of them is I have footage from a small claims court case that I covered, where the man involved in the court case also had a custody case here in Santa Clara County, and his minors counsel was Nicole Ford. And he lied about something that I had done at that small claims court case, saying that I was harassing him and that I was doing something that I wasn't doing. And so we have the camera footage from the courts. So for those of you who have asked about police records. I'm trying to show you how I get those as a journalist and how any member of the public can, but I'm also going to show how I get records like the video cameras that are posted at courthouses. We can get those through public records, and if all else fails, you might need an attorney to subpoena it. But a lot of these records, if you ask for them timely, you can get them through a public records request. So I'm going to cover all of that, and hopefully that helps all of you in dealing with whatever issues you have in the court, or if you're just interested in how our courts are actually operating. I hope these videos teach you that. Okay, thanks, and that's 2 times today, you guys, and I really appreciate you all coming in.